Mystia's Izakaya is one of the greatest Toho fan games ever created. There's a lot you can say about it. In fact, I already did. But if I had to pick my favorite aspect from the game, it would be its ability to write the various characters that appear in the series in a way that is entertaining, natural, and of course, accurate. The only real inaccurate part would be the surplus of food and drink Mystia is capable of serving. But even then, who's to say she couldn't do that? Also, it wouldn't make for much of a game if she only ever served what we knew her to serve. So let's attempt to correct this supposed inaccuracy, and see if Mystia can manage to save Gensokyo through only her tried and true menu. First off, what are Mystia's known dishes? Grilled lamprey. Anything else? From what I could find from canon, Mystia has told Aya that she sometimes uses regular eels or loaches. From Sengetsu, she apparently sells Odin and dried eel skewers, and Sunny is seen later ordering chikuwa. So can I use any of this? No. Grilled lamprey is the only usable dish here. So how about drinks? Sparrow sake is all that is known. So there you go. Okay, with that established, let's get to work. Quick flow of the game, you spend the day gathering resources or talking to others, and the night running the Izakaya. Mystia always has a debt she must pay back in 2 weeks, and after each increasing debt, a new area opens. Since I have all the DLC, those areas end up opening too, but I won't be engaging with any of the DLC for this run. So basically, the goal is to have enough money at the end of each debt, and that is primarily accomplished by running the cart. So here's my day structure. You get 1 gathering spot for Sparrow Sake that ranges from 5 to 10. I did get 15 exactly once though, not sure what determines the amount gathered. Originally, I just ran to the river to gather as much lamprey as I can, but until 1400 hours, river spots are primarily seaweed and very rarely lamprey. So the time between the sake pickup and 2 PM is used gathering random ingredients. I also used this time to check the merchant, which takes no time, though the only things I ever bought were eggs and peppers. When 2 PM hits, I rotate the river, gathering lamprey, which seems to range from 0 to 6. It also results in trout. Like, a lot of trout. Enough to definitely have an effect on the trout population. With 4 river checks taking 2 hours, then resetting, I get 8 lamprey gathers. I don't know my average, but it's fair to say I was more often than not getting at least 10 lamprey a day. Now the Izakaya, you set your menu in the prep screen. Normal guests will only order from what you select. Mystia starts with some ingredients and 3 dishes, but we're only using the grilled lamprey. Drinks are interesting, as regardless of the drink menu, guests can still order tea if they want it, so I can't avoid this. But honestly, the scarcity of Sparrow Sake itself would have been quite the trouble. Tea is worth 1 yen, so I'm letting this slide mainly due to having no real control over it. Cookware is here too, but the only thing I'm using is the grill. As it's still the tutorial stage, only normal guests appear for a while. Each area has 5 types. These guys actually do have their own preferences that if you've played this game before, probably ignored. Even though I can only cook lamprey, there's nothing stopping me from jamming it full of whatever I can to hit tags. Which actually brings us to the first potential hurdle. Grilled lamprey cannot include meat or vegetables in the cook, lest it become dark matter. This means both the meat and vegetable columns are useless. This doesn't matter too much, since getting higher ratings with normal customers doesn't do much. Well, I'm actually not sure what it does at all outside of improved mood. I just kind of assumed it affected the chance of another order and tip percentage. Where good ratings really matter are the rare guests. Each area has a minimum of 3, and they don't use the menu. They order by preference. They're still getting a grilled lamprey, so it's up to me to figure out how to pack the thing to get a good response. Responses range from love to hate. Love gets reward spell cards. Hate leads to punishment ones. I don't know the exact way ratings work, but from what I gather from observation, more like tags equals higher rating. This is obvious, but I'm stating it because it seems that if you can hit like 4 tags for the lamprey alone, the drink preference doesn't even matter. Drinks can't be fiddled with, so you're pretty limited there. It's nice that the Sparrow Sake does hit a few at least. Should also note characters have dislikes too that you'll only know from hitting them once, or maxing their bond level, or googling it. And dislike tags, obviously, reduce the overall reception to the meal. Back to the food tags, the only thing to keep in mind is that if you can't at least hit a neutral response, it's not worth the hassle, as the customers will pay less than the listed price, or even harass you. Let's talk about some of the customers now. Pretty much everyone here likes meat, so I can't hit orange ratings. The snake yokai is the only one who orders sake normally, otherwise sake orders are limited to paired customers. It's also worth noting that in these pairs, only one is ordering, so paying attention to whose preferences matter is important. Now the rare ones. Rumia can hit neutral with raw and peculiar, but her drink preference isn't hittable. Riggle likes most of the same as Rumia, as well as sweet. One of her drink tags is hittable too, so pretty good. Chen is about the same as Riggle, but with aquatic instead of raw. Marissa is an asshole, and basically unpleasable. The real kicker with Marissa is that her punishment spell card steals from you and skips out on the tab. That kick wasn't fun to lose sake to, so the only thing that started serving Marissa was a boot from her table. well, turned out that while booting does kill the vibe and break the combo, it avoids the punishment spells. So this was how I dealt with difficult rares. For maximum efficiency, I wouldn't kick them out until there was a reason to, since I didn't want to break the combo. Not that I really know what it does anyway. This is actually how I learned what happens when the patience gauge runs out. The customer just gets up and leaves without a fuss. Still breaks the combo though. I think customers in line also have patience meters you can't see, as I swear I watched Tenshi leave mid-line before later on. Now, you might have noticed in the footage blue papers above some customers' heads. Let's talk about that next. Characters have quests that grant special currency, ingredients, or money. These quests range from giving ingredients, cooking dishes, or just pressing A on a few things. Some of these quests have deadlines that must be completed, otherwise it's game over. Don't worry, the game lets you know what ones those are. Rare guests in the area have bond levels, and you get a quest at the end of a level that gives the Mystia a new recipe. It tells you to serve it to the character in question at the Izakaya. Obviously I cannot do that, which means I'm locked out of every bond up reward. The only one that would have been really helpful was Wriggle's Max bond, as she does a full map gathering for you, which would have increased the Lamprey and sake I could get daily by a good amount. There's also quests specific to increasing the size of the area's Izakaya. Now I had already decided that staying in the cart was part of the accuracy, but it wasn't worth mentioning since upgrades require cooking dishes and large sums of cash. So even if I wanted to use the higher levels, I couldn't really get them. You do at least get the level 2 one for free for Youkai Trail, but I didn't use it. That's about everything worth discussing on the Youkai Trail, and later sections won't have as much fluff to discuss. The last thing to mention is that the debt was 3,000 yen, and I ended with 6,000 yen. Now we're moving on to Area 2, the human village. But a couple things to mention first. You don't have to run the Izakaya every night. Sometimes I skip them due to a lack of resources. When gaining access to a new area, you don't immediately get to open the Izakaya there, and I skipped these intermission days. At least, I think I skipped them all. After the first debt, Kyoko stops working for free and requires a commission fee. Obviously, 5% of the nightly profits is an unacceptable amount of loss, so I let her go immediately. Now the human village debt is 6,000, and we're starting with 3,000 already. I forgot to mention that the general range of profit for the Izakaya and Youkai Trail was around 300 to 700 yen. This number will go up both due to more customer flow in later areas, as well as more sake orders. And Mystia's level increasing, which could increase the tip percentage. Anyways, let's discuss the day portion first. The only thing of note for gathering is the ginkgo nut for photogenic. Eggs are here too, but those are purchasable. Quest-wise, there are two worth mentioning. First is a recurring one tied to Aku's reward spell card that can net some rare ingredients. The second comes from Renosuke, who wants you to feed him dark matter at the Izakaya. The only reason I debated this one was because it paid 500 yen, but ultimately decided not to do it, since while dark matter is possible to make by cooking a lamprey, I chose to consider it a separate dish entirely. The last and most important thing here comes a bit later. Renosuke starts selling kitchenware, some standard, and others purchasable with the special currency gained from quests. The one I want here is the Sparrow Grill. I'll talk about this more in the Izakaya section. Now onto that section. But first I wanted to state that I'll only be opening in the newest areas that are available. You don't get the ability to invite others from other areas until bond level 1 is complete, so each section will only feature the rares who can naturally appear at said section. Alright, so we have our normal guests, who are more likely to order sake, except the human child. This lad right here is more than likely the reason why customers can order the non-alcoholic tea, despite it not being on the menu. All these customers can hit orange ratings, the easiest being the regular men and women, as they like the fresh tag, and I have a lot of 2-week-old trout from the Lamprey gathers to meet their demands. Now the rares. First, we have Aku. A lot of her tags are hittable for both food and drink. The deciding factor for her spell cards is basically which tags she is directly ordering, or at least it would be. The Sparrow Grill I bought has the ability to ignore a rare customer's specific request and make them judge the food based on their preferences. This means regardless of what tag Aku asks for, I can get the same rating with the same ingredients. The caveat is that this makes the dish take 30% more time to cook, and only works while in hyper mode. Except that last bit doesn't seem to be true. I constantly got the benefits of this grill outside of hyper mode, which I can only assume isn't intended. Moving on, Canon likes mild, but that's the only reliable tag you can hit for both food and drink. You can use a special rare ingredient, provided you got it, but it only amounts to neutral, so it's far from worth it. Kassen's only reasonably hittable tag is the 1 and 3 on her drink. For whatever reason, Kassen doesn't like sweet, which just doesn't make sense. Renosuke's only hittable tag is fresh, aka not worth it. Marissa is here too, by the way. In fact, she could appear everywhere, and the end result is always her getting the boot. I know I'm not exactly making friends in this run, but I definitely am making an enemy out of Marissa. That's about it for here. The general range of profit was 600 to 900, with some days breaking 1,000. By the debt repayment, I had about 14,000 yen, leaving me with 8,000 to start the next area. The next area is the Hakurei Shrine, with a debt of 10,000 yen. Daytime structure here didn't really want ingredients outside of maybe some peaches, and the shops at this point, while packing pretty primo ingredients, cost too much to make a decent stockpile out of. After a few days, I gained access to the Moria branch shrine, which I started using between sake and lamprey time on the trail. You can do this 4 times a day. It always gives a frog coin, and sometimes gives a drink, 150 yen, or a bunch of finished dishes. Originally, I was doing it for the funds, but I realized something. The dishes you get here come from your recipe list, yes, but you never actually cook them. So I decided to use these for quest completions, prioritizing the ones that gave money. If you think that's cheating, well, let me just say, spoiler alert, the impact this had overall was minuscule, but also required to finish the game. More on that later. Quest-wise, we have some really notable ones. The first just requires you to ask the rares in the area their opinion on some tea, and doing so increases the price of tea to 15 yen for 3 days. The second is some guy just wanting 24 pitchers of beer. Sounds annoying, but he gives you 1,500 for it, which is significantly more money than the beers were worth. One last thing of note is that sweets became an unpopular trend. Trends are basically just additional tags tied to other tags based on whatever the papers decide. Now the Izakaya. It's much busier than the last area, and due to me using my time to pull at the branch shrine, I stopped gaining extra ingredients. My supply dropped very low when I decided to stop paying attention to the regular guests' preferences. Also, the guests really only ordered tea here on multiple orders, so the benefit of the increased tea price was actually quite minimal. The rare guest here are Reimu, who does like some of those rare tags, but also sweets. However, she also dislikes unpopular trends, which ruined the sweet tag for her, meaning the days where that was trending made Reimu virtually unpleasable. Funnily enough, that hindrance to Reimu was a direct buff to Tenshi, as she both likes sweets and unpopular trends. She also likes fruity, so putting a peach in her lamprey was a triple whammy. She was very easy to please. Suika, on the other hand, cannot be pleased at all. You can't hit a single tag. My attempts at scouting resulted in the little bastard stealing my beautiful blue juice. The last rare who starts appearing here is Tei, who at this point in the game doesn't have her likes recorded. She also always uses her punishment spell card whenever she leaves, and regardless of how she leaves. This spell asks Mystia to purchase rare ingredients at ridiculous prices, and refusing breaks the combo. Again, I don't really know what combo does, but I tried not to break it. And obviously I wasn't going to pay for her product, even if I did really want that 530,000 yen bunny. The average income pretty much became 700 to 1200. By the deadline, I had over 20,000 yen, leaving 10,000 yen towards the next area. So before the next area properly starts, Mystia wakes up at the shrine hungover, which messes with my resource route by a half hour. More annoying than impactful. The real annoyance is that a number of the days start with Mystia at the next area, which is an hour of time's distance from the trail, messing the sake harvest up ever so slightly more. That next area being the Scarlet Devil Mansion, with a debt of 15,000 yen. It has no real useful gathering spots, but you can buy flour and butter for filling and greasy tags respectively. There also aren't any really useful quests, but a couple of them that require same-day clearing, otherwise you game over. The first of these requires a permit to open there, which leads to a challenge with Yomu. This happens twice in the game, and there is no penalty to failure. I also can't skip it, so I kinda just lingered until Yomu yelled at me. Another one of these quests, sadly, marked the end of the run. You need the Vineyard Pass, which requires Meiling's autograph, which requires a dish with the Chinese tag. This is probably why Renosuke sells 2 recipes with a tag, as the only other method here would be through bond level recipes from rare guests. I didn't actually have to buy the recipe, as Rumia's level 1 recipe, the stinky tofu, is Chinese, so I just ended up cooking that to continue the game. Quick note here that I overlooked. The Goblin shop at the SDM does sell pork stir-fry, which is Chinese, meaning there is a very simple way to complete this request without sullying the challenge. I could have reset until the branch shrine gave me one to use instead, however this would have only delayed the inevitable. There's a point where Sakuya gives Mystia a recipe for steak, and at the end of the Izakaya part of that day, Remy visits to eat. Now you don't have to cook her the steak you just learned, but the game takes away your cookware and only leaves a frying pan. So no matter what, you have to cook something in that pan, and the steak recipe simply avoids a soft lock. Now there would be a way to get through this on a technicality, since there is a recipe in the game for fried lamprey, but that requires advancing Rumia's bond a level, which can't be done without feeding her the stinky tofu. Now I know what you're thinking, you could get it from the branch shrine and feed it to her like that, but I decided that's a no-go since A, I'm only opening in the newest areas, which means there will never actually be an opportunity to feed Rumia the stinky tofu, as you can't invite any rare guests from other areas until you get through at least bond level 1. And B, what kind of jackass purchases fast food and disguises it as their own cooking? So in short, there are some hurdles you could jump through to get the fried lamprey, but my own restrictions wouldn't make it any different than if I just slapped Remy across the face with a steak. I'm actually not even sure if you can skip the steak, since I didn't try. Not doing so could have resulted in a game over, for all I know. So yeah, I suppose the challenge is over. But with the end of the game so close, I'm gonna go until it's an affirmative game over. So with that, the last thing relevant to the daytime portion is the required purchase of a 2,000 yen jar from Ryunosuke. Now the Izakaya portion. At this point, I was actually very low on sake, and Lamprey was always teetering. I didn't feel safe opening without at least 25 Lamprey to sell, so I had to take a few extended days off. I ended up ignoring the normal guest likes again, though the fairies I later found out were easy hits with the fresh tag with my 8-week-old trout. The rares include Mailing, who I can only hit neutral from the filling tag. I burned through more flour than I thought, and decided it wasn't worth the price anymore, and started booting her. Patchouli requires the really hard stuff to get a good response, even with an easy hit to sweet, so she also caught the boot like Mailing. Cherno is very easy to hit tags with, another one like Tenshi where even without the drink, I could get the reward spell card, which sometimes gave me some Sparrow Sake, so I felt it was worth it to use the resources. She also gave ice cubes, which are nice for Tay, as she likes refreshing, and she's still appearing. I actually ended up going over Cherno's budget, which made her use her punishment spell card. Fortunately, it didn't matter, but I had no idea she could do that. So by the end of the debt, I had 26,000 yen, with the general profit being 700 to 1,300, leaving me with 11,000 for the next area. But there's a bit more before I can move on. After the debt payment, you have to defeat Sakuya in a cook-off, which basically just means you have to cook 4 dishes for Remilia. I ended up selling at a Lamprey on this night, which is how I found out that customers order seaweed miso when this happens. Remy doesn't change your cookware, and I had the pot, so I made her the finest seaweed miso I could. Except she didn't like it. She liked it so little that she told me to get lost, and I ended up at the title screen. So yeah, that's a game over. So I don't really know how Remy scores this thing, but I tried a few times with Lamprey proper and my drink selection, but she failed me a couple more times. I ended up sticking with the Lamprey, but I did change the drink selection, and I passed. I'm honestly not sure if I could have done it with just the tea and sake if I pushed more on the Lamprey's tags. I guess I didn't want to restart again, especially with already knowing the steak incident meant I was already in a sinking ship. Well, now we're in the last area of the game, the Bamboo Forest of the Lost. The final debt is 20,000 yen, and I have 13,000 yen. Turns out that Sakuya gives you a refund on that jar after the cooking competition. It's too bad that Tay almost immediately takes it away from you, so it's back to 11,000 yen. The area early on is actually pretty barren, so my trips to the branch shrine remain the same. I actually ended up with a 100-pole milestone outfit, whereas Rainbow's box, only a few steps away, never saw a single coin from me. The quest situation is the same as the SDM, but I did end up doing one for the special grill Ryunosuke has, as it increases tips. Did it matter? Not as much as I'd hoped. The only thing left to mention is the cooking competition between Moko and Kaguya, which doesn't happen until a few days in, and I'll talk about that more in a bit. Now in the Izakaya section, normal guests are all repeated at this point, and Tay is the only rare guest for the first few days. Kaguya and Moko become patrons once their contest starts. That contest is just whose dish sells better at the Izakaya. But I'm not putting the items on the menu, so it will be a draw. Also, once this contest starts, Tay stops forcing you into her little shop. By the end of it, she had tried to sell me Raisin 3 times, where I never saw her once in my first playthrough. Fun fact, buying Raisin has Tay interrupt saying you aren't supposed to be able to buy that, and asks if you cheated. Afterwards, she removes the commission fee from your partners. If you can afford Raisin, this doesn't really matter. But it's neat that something does happen if you manage to scrape the cash together. Anyways, back to rares. Tay was always hittable with sweet and refreshing, but refreshing wasn't easy to hit until Cherno. Moko is also easy to hit since she likes grilled. She's also the reason I bought those peppers way back, though I overkilled the quantity for sure. Kaguya is the worst rare in the game for this, as not only are her tags hard to hit, she also actively dislikes Signature, the Lamprey's main tag. In other words, send her back to the moon. Now that should be all the rares, but for some reason Rin Satsuki showed up, and I honestly have no idea why. I thought she was part of the collab characters, which I have disabled, but I guess not. I did only see her a single time, which felt really odd. That's pretty much it for this area. I was worried the competition needed a winner, but it turns out if they tied, which in this case was 0 soul for both, Kaguya declares it a win for her, so I didn't have to do anything at all. By the time I had enough money for the debt, I kinda just closed shop in favor of grabbing ingredients to prepare for the final match. With no time limit here, I gathered until I had over 100 Lamprey, just in case. The final challenge is broken into 3 segments. Segment 1 requires serving normal guests. This part did kinda worry me, as it felt like I wasn't making enough headway relative to the time limit, but it ended up not being an issue. Segment 2 is rare guests, needing only 5 reward spell cards to pass. At every 10 seconds, one of them launches a punishment spell. At this point, there are a number of characters who I can hit this for. Just need to be mindful of who's around, as I left Mailing alone, and she crushed Patchy's table as soon as I threw her food. You can actually kick the ghosts out for no penalty, so you can manage whose punishments can roll, as some are much worse than others. The last segment is feeding Yuyuko. She asked for tags, but it turned out that no matter what you used, it didn't change her response. I ended up grilling and slapping anything I could into it, only really paying attention to the chillable tag for the drink. The slow start cost me, as I timed it out with only 4% left, but it was very clearly possible. So I went and bought all the grills I could afford from Rinosuke, which ended up at 8, and tried again. This time for Yuyuko, I lined up all 8 grills, ran all the Lamprey, peeped the drink cabinet, and just mashed as much trout as I could onto the Lamprey. I ran through over 100 trout here alone, and with a perfect amount cooked, and no wasted food, I quelled Yuyuko's unstoppable appetite with only Lamprey, sake, and some tea. That's the end of the challenge. If it wasn't for a few scripted events, this would certainly be possible. I'm actually shocked that I not only made enough money for each area, but that I well exceeded it to the point where I could skip like half of the final area. The game doesn't truly end until Mystia has a concert, but since I couldn't bond with anyone, the turnout is, well, heartbreaking. At the very least, all the partners, special guests, and normal guests are all in the audience via a picture in the credits, but Mystia didn't sing a single word during the whole thing. I did not enjoy that. There's not much else to say. It was a fun little project, and I enjoyed replaying through Mystia again. Maybe in time I'll find another stupid way to play this game, but that probably won't be until I sink hours into the dev's next game in the near future of 2027. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you during the next incident.